No. Good evening. My name is Jim Conlon, and welcome to our special edition of this week's RCB Radio Sports Show, West Clare, live on 92.5 and 94.8 FM, and online at www.rcb.ie. This week's show will also be streamed on our YouTube channel, RCB Sport. I'm delighted this evening to be joined by an all-star hurling cast of legends, which includes Sir Farrell, Shawnee Mcgrath, TJ Ryan, and Adrian Finley. As tonight we count down the top 10 hurlers who have won Hurler of the Year over the last 20 years, of which there are 18 different winners. And what we're going to do for tonight's proceedings, this is only to be selected eligible to this. You have to have won Hurler of the Year from the last 20 years, from 2000 to 2020. There are 18 different winners. There is one winner has won it 3 times, 2002, 2006, and 2012. So that's why we have 18 winners. So I'm just going to count down the order from 2000 to 2019, and then we're going to open it up by coming to Sir Farrell to hear his selection from 10 to 5. So from 2000, DJ Kerry from Kilkenny won the award. 2001, Tommy Dunn from Tipperary won the award. Henry Schaeffler in 2002 won a 3-time winner, won it in 2002, 2006, and 2012. 2003 winner is JJ Delaney from Kilkenny. 2004 is Sean O'Halpine from Cork, and followed up by his teammate in 2005, Jerry O'Connor from Cork. Dan Shanahan won it in 2007 from Waterford. 2008 winner is Owen Larkin from Kilkenny, and his teammate Tammy Welsh won it in 2009. 2010 winner is Larry Corbett from Tipperary. 2011 winner is Michael Finley from Kilkenny. 2013 is the only Clare selection in Tony Kelly. 2014, another Kilkenny winner in Richie Hogan. 2015, TJ Reid wins the award for Kilkenny. 2016, we have our only Waterford representative, Austin Gleason. 2017, we have our only Galway representative in Joe Canning. In 2018, we have our only Limerick representative in Keane Lynch. And 2019, we have our second Tipperary representative in Seamus Candlin. So, sir, I'm just going to come to you from first. So if you don't mind, Sir Farrell, if you could tell me from 10 down to 5, what is your selection?
Well, I suppose, Jim, the first thing is that they're all great players and all playing, I suppose you'd have to say, on winning teams and on good teams. And you could have great hurlers on maybe not as good a team and maybe not getting it. So my number 10 would be Austin Gleason, the man from Waterford. A lot of Waterford people would feel he had a great year, but maybe he got it too young because the following few years just didn't follow through for him. Number 9 would be Keane Lynch, brilliant midfielder for Limerick, and has all his best years ahead as well. And number 8 was Richie Hogan, Kilkenny. Another Kilkenny man, number 7, Michael Finley, powerhouse midfield, centre back, could play him anywhere really, now gone into management awfully. Number 6, Tony Kelly. Unsung, this guy is brilliant to look at really, and you know, both club and county he's been fantastic. And number 5 was the one and only Larry Corbett. I suppose no one will ever forget the 3 goals he got, you know, against Kilkenny in that All-Ireland.
So, TJ, if I can come to you now, from 10 to 5, what is your order in ranking the best 20 hurlers over the last 20 years?
Jim, I'm in trouble already because I have to bow to Cyril's superior knowledge, obviously in all walks of life in hurling. And he's after naming 4 fellas there, right, that I didn't have included in my 10 at all. So I'm in bother before we start.
All right, don't worry.
I suppose to just recognise what Cyril said there, right, this is an impossible task that you set us, Jim. These are obviously some of the greatest hurlers of all time, not to mind the past 20 years. Some fantastic hurlers who have given hours of enjoyment, and it is probably unfair of someone like me to be leaving out a hurler of the year out of my top 10. It's a bit like, you know what I mean? Maybe somebody on standing on the ditch dropping somebody else, right? So it's probably not fair. But for the purpose of the exercise, I will give you my top 10, starting with the top 5. So at number 10 for me, I probably have started with midfielders and I'm kind of maybe unfair and defenders then. I'm all attackers all the way home, right? So number 10 for me was Jerry O'Connor. Unbelievable engine in the middle of the field. I just enjoyed him, came up against him a couple of times, struggled. Just a phenomenal hurler, stickman, wristman, unbelievable. Number 9 was Michael Finley, obviously the powerhouse of that great Kilkenny team. Just an unbelievable ox in the middle of the field. I think Brian Cody once referred to him as the strongest man that he ever came across, which is some statements coming from Brian Cody. Number 8 for me is a little bit of bias here. I've gone for Keane Lynch. I just think that it is early days for him. but you would go to a match just to see him hurl. He has that bit of wizardry and that little bit of magic that all the top really class players have. Number 7 for me is probably one of the greatest defenders of all time in JJ Delaney. And number 6 is the great Candlin, who's had a fantastic year for Tip. And whilst he's won hurler of the year only once, Jim, he's been runner-up on 3 different occasions. So in the last 10 years, been a phenomenal hurler. So that's my number 10 to number 6.
10 to number 6. And we'll just take your number 5 there, as we have, or Sir gave his number 5 as well.
Oh, sorry, my number 5, I went for Tammy Welsh. Obviously, another guy who needs no introduction. Backs, midfield, forwards, one of the all-time greats of the game, and would have to be in anybody's, I suppose, list of top 10, I think.
Thanks, TJ. We'll come now to Shawnee. Shawnee from 10 ball from his halfbacks. Good breaking forward onto his half forwards, getting ball in it, and a guy who's well able to score as well. So he's a quintessential all-around midfielder.
Yeah, exactly. You know, you've said it all there, Jim. You know, a great stick man as well as everything else with vision. You know, that spatial awareness and vision that all great hurlers have. You know, and you know, Tommy's went on to be a well-renowned coach. I think he was with Dublin a few years back. He was obviously with Liam Sheedy. He's been with Tip for a few years and really well respected. Just loves the game of hurling. You know, one of those died in the wool in Tumavara, but you know, just a great lover of hurling and gave so much to the Tip jersey. And you're right, you know, it's only 19 years ago. It seems 40 years ago. Unfortunately, we all age a bit, and the modern game has moved on so well. But there's players of that era that would easily fit into the modern style of hurling, and I think Tommy is one of those. Like some of the players 20 years ago that probably wouldn't be able to adjust. But Tommy had that fitness, the stick work, the vision, you know, short passing, long passing. And he was a very good free taker as well, which is forgotten about as well. He was, you know, very accurate on the dead ball.
And how do you think, before we move on, how do you think Tommy Dunn would have fitted into the 2019 version of Tipperary under Liam Sheedy? Where would you envision the role for Tommy in that?
Yeah, it's hard to know because it's such a different style of hurling. But I'd say he still would have been a midfielder. You know, he would have adjusted to the, like I suppose he's, you know, Brendon Meyer is probably the modern Tommy Dunn for me.
Yeah.
You know, it's kind of they're kind of, you know, you have to put 20 years in the difference between both players. But you know, if Tommy had 20 years on him, to me, he'd be very similar to a Brendon Meyer type player. That's the caliber of the guy. And I think it was TJ mentioned Brendon Meyer for me is a player who has been in outstanding form over the last 2 or 3 years, and it's amazing he's not on this list. You know, he'd certainly be in that league. Yeah.
And I suppose, Sir, we'll move on now to the second part. And if I can get your number 4 to 2, we leave out your number 1 for the moment, Sir, and we'll come back to that as we build up the excitement. But, Sir, if I could have your 4 now to number 2. So that's 4, 3 and 2, Sir.
Well, my 4 would be Joe Kenny, you know. I suppose along with Tommy Welch, to kind of both join force really. The two of these guys would be off and on one another directly and indirectly. The way the modern game is going, Jim, like numbers don't mean anything. If you're a forward, any back could be on you or vice versa. Like Tommy Welch, for a small guy, brilliant in the air, great catch the ball. To me, he never bothered about opposition. He just covered the half-backs the whole time, got the ball, delivered fast, and like he played hard, got it hard, but he never stood down. And he was typified by the day he got the belt in All Ireland from, was it Benny Dunn? He just went back up again. Like that's the way they play, and that's what you like to see. Joe Cannon, fantastic talent, like probably one of the best hurlers Galway ever had. Has it both left and right, kind of, you know, good on the stride, great free taker, but great player, and can take the game by the scruff of the neck. And as like some of the lads are referred to, like, starting off was very good, but like has developed over time into a great player and a great leader. My number 3 would be TJ Reid. Like, again, this guy, like, it's like a conductor of an orchestra, the way he kind of, you know, left-handed, kind of the Kit Oak style, but beautiful on the ball, doing great things. And like when a lot of the leaders had left Kilkenny and now they're kind of going through a little poor patch compared to their standards, he's standing up tall both for club and county, like, and every day he goes out, like, he's leading the attack, he's taking the frees, he's doing everything really. He's very hard to mark. Number 2 would be another Kilkenny man, DJ Kerry. Like, again, you see, we're inclined to think of the lads that are kind of near to us that have played lately. But when you go back and the annals a bit, like DJ was a fantastic player, like, he had fantastic skill, could make the ball talk, and the scores he got. I remember one day I was over a team we were playing Galway, playing Kilkenny, we were leading well at half time, and single-handedly, now he was on a fairly good team as well, but single-handedly in Thurles, he just took off. And lads were saying, why didn't such a lad mark him? Sure, we all were marking him, but like, there was no one able to mark him. Simply said, he was just different class. And like, again, stood the test of time. And these Kilkenny lads, like, they were very good. They came on, you know, one crowd led to another crowd, and the present team has just passed away now. They passed on. Like, they were really unbelievable. That we're all so good and so together, led by Brian Cody, and since he kept them all going. So they're my top 2 or 3 there, and you have to get to number 1 yet. He's still king of the castle.
And TJ, just in relation to you now, TJ Ryan, could I have your 4-2, please?
Yeah, good news. And myself and Cyril are back in sync with our selections here. So things are okay. Yeah, my top 4 players are 4 forwards, 4 leaders, and 4 guys that every single day that they took the pitch, they were very much a marked man, and they still were able to come out on top day in, day out. There were 4 free takers, and just phenomenal to watch. Game changers every single day. When it came down to, I suppose, maybe that piece of the game where the game was there to be won, these guys more often than not came up trumps. So the order is tricky. I'm sure we could probably all argue it for until 12 o'clock tonight, and nobody would be right, nobody would be wrong. So my number 4 is DJ. I marked him actually a good long number of years ago. Just a phenomenal player, and as Cyril said there, just one for the ages, DJ Kerry. Number 3, like, we argue about this guy at home regularly to say that he could potentially be one of the greatest of all time, TJ Reid at number 3. His ability to carry teams at the moment, be it Ballyhale when they come under pressure, just to get a score or win that free. Last year in the semi-final against Limerick, when work rate was just off the charts, TJ Reid's ball-willing ability, the amount of balls, and I think it was probably the first time I've seen last year, sir, where a guy in the forwards got man of the match on a number of occasions without actually scoring from play. Probably told the story of TJ Reid, the amount of work he does for this Kilkenny team. And it's probably a little bit different to the likes of maybe a Richie or an Owen Larkin or these boys, in that TJ has probably found himself on a Kilkenny team that hasn't been as strong maybe as previous times. So he's carrying it just literally, nearly, I won't be unfair to the other guys, but like literally single-handedly, day in, day out. His free taking just percentages are unbelievable. So for him, he's at number 3 for me. And maybe in time, maybe another year or 2, he might go all the way to number 1. At number 2 for me is Joe Canning. Just the king of the stick men. Watching him again there recently on some of the old games. He's line ball taking. He's dead ball taking, right? Even in the final, Cyril, that Limerick won, even when they were out of it, right? Joe single-handedly brought Galway back into that game. He's 21-yard free. Again, was just a sight to just be there to see. Nobody saw it in the top corner. Just has had, I suppose, the onus of having to carry Galway hurling for a number of years, and has done it incredibly well. Galway are probably going to struggle in life without a Joe Canning, and I don't know where the next Joe Canning is coming from. But again, one for the ages. And I think if we're here in 20, 30, 40 years' time, I think we'll be talking still about players like Joe Canning. So for me, to recap, DJ at 4, TJ at 3, and Joe Canning at 2.
And Shawnee Mcgrath now from 4-2. What is your selection?
Yeah, my second defender gets in there, Jim. So I've Tammy Welsh at number 4. Look, doesn't need a whole pile of an intro. That speaks for themselves. 9 All-Irelands and 9 All-Stars. The rerun of the games lately showed the 09 final against Tip, and you kind of see, looking at the Lark Corbett ended up trying to mark him a couple of years later, like the amount of ball that he was getting and winning All-Stars in multiple positions, even though I just referenced him as a defender. But again, looking at his stats, Tommy played over 50 odd games and scored 136. And some of those scores as well came from the half-back line. They weren't always when he started. He started actually as, I think, as a kind of a forward, and he played midfield in the 2003 final. But just his ability to play in multiple positions, again, it referenced with Richie Hogan, his aerial ability for a man that wasn't that tall. Jesus, Tommy was only 5'8", 5'9", but his strength in the air and often came up and maybe was targeted in his earlier part. Maybe people thought he was a bit naive, not naive, but maybe just a little bit of a weak spot there because of his height disadvantage. But players much taller than he was able to outlead them, and he was a phenomenal hurler. Look, Joe Canning is in there. He's number 3 for me. He could have been 3, 2 or 1. I agree with the 2 lads before. Like, he was just incredible. And again, another amazing stat. You look at goal getting again. Obviously, you knew always on the goal getter in your team, but for a guy that's played 50 odd games so far. He said, well, every 2 games. I mean, if you're buying players in the Premiership, that's gold or stuff. You know, you're talking about 50, 60 million for a player like that in soccer terms. So from a goal scoring ability, from a ability, 4 club All-Irelands, just has all. Again, Cyril would know him from the Fitz days. He was a phenomenal Fitzgibbon player as well below in LIT. And TJ references kind of penalty, 21-yard taken, his line ball taken. Some young fella got a clip on his phone and put it up on YouTube or Twitter or something later behind the All-Ireland when he took that line ball in the first half. It was a great shot, and it gave you a real snapshot of how far out he was and the angle he was at, and it was like a beautiful golf shot onto the green straight over the bar. And this is where it gets contentious between 2 and 1. I've gone for Henry, number 2. Again, scratch the change from 1, put him back to number 2. Just battles him as a hurler. That's phenomenal altogether. Played, what did he play? 71 championship games, the highest amount of games for any player. The longevity was phenomenal. His debut year was 99 against us. You could even see at that stage we played him in a league game down in Barclay Ring. Kind of tall, brawny, scrawny lad. But you could see his ability from the off and just got better and better as the seasons went on. His average for Kilkenny is around 8 or 9 points. Like, to get that over 10 or 20 games, you'd say fair enough, but to get it over 70 odd games, I think the one thing that kind of distinguishes Henry from the other players is I'd find it hard to find a game that he was poor in. He was always minimum 7 out of 10 and north of 7, 8, 9. And like that's really the difference between good, very good, and brilliant is consistency. For me, he was just an unbelievably consistent player. 11 All-Stars, 10 All-Irelands, and as you said earlier at the intro, 3 hurler years, like an incredible player. So, but look, I really tied with him at number 2 and number 1, but I went for someone else at number 1, and I'll talk about him in a minute. He was my favourite player of all time.
And I suppose now I'll bring you on to Adrian. Adrian, if I can have your 4 to 2, please.
Yeah, I went for really difficult choices, of course, but I went for number 4, TJ Reid. So I think he's in all our top 5 or top 4. But fantastic hurler. Again, deceivingly strong. You know, probably 6'1", 6'2". I remember standing up beside him. I didn't think he was as tall. He doesn't look as tall, togged out, but he's no small man. Great aerial ball-winning ability, super in fact, you know, and just, you know, he's free taking. I think TJ mentioned, like, his percentage, you know, scoring from frees is phenomenal, time after time after time. He very seldom has an off day on the frees, you know, and that's part of the reason, you know, a so-called weak in Kilkenny of recent have been thereabouts, you know, knocking on the door, because they have probably the best free taker in the game, and it's so important in the modern game. So but a lovely guy, very humble guy, you know, again, typical of the Cody era, you know, a team player first and foremost, and you know, a scorer secondary, you know, to all that. So yeah, so TJ, my number 4. Number 3, I went for Cyril's Galway man, Joe Canning. You know, again, if this guy was with Kilkenny or Tip, he'd probably have, you know, 3, 4, 7, 8 All-Irelands, who knows. Delighted, I think the whole country was delighted in 2017 when he eventually got that Celtic Cross, which was so deserving. But, you know, again, time after time carrying Galway. You can see what Galway are like without Joe. They're just devoid of idea. They're devoid of leadership up front. So when he's in their attack, it ticks, and he makes it tick. So, you know, to carry all that weight on a county's shoulders for the last 10, 11, 12 years, and yet deliver time after time, it's phenomenal. It's phenomenal, and consistent performances. So Joe, striking ability was being mentioned, you know, whether it's a sideline or free, it's just effortless. It's like he's hitting a Big Bertha or a Callaway or whatever just all the time. It's just floating, and phenomenal. Number 2, I went for who I believe is the best, certainly the best defender I've ever seen in the game, is JJ Delaney. You know, so a lot of those to get the credit are scoring forwards, as per seen in the list and the choices. But, you know, the art of defending is just as important, and it doesn't go as well noticed because they're not scoring huge amounts every game. But JJ Delaney, for me, is probably the finest defender I've ever seen. The previous, that was probably Joe Hennessy, sir, back in the early 80s. He was fantastic with Kilkenny as well. But JJ had everything. He was strong in the air. He was great striker, hook and block, and just teak, tough, and not dirty, just tough, typical Kilkenny back that, you know, played on the edge, but fairly on the edge. And, you know, you knew you were after having a game after marking after marking JJ. And if he came out on top, you were one of a few over 10 or 12 years that came out on top. He, like that half back line for Kilkenny in the noughties, himself and Tommy and these guys, just phenomenal. And that was the springboard. A lot of people forget that, but that was the springboard for their success. Very few teams could break down that half back line, and that really led to their dominance. And JJ certainly led from the front there. And then ultimately he ended up full back, which was a position he didn't probably want to play in. I think he said that, but by God, he adjusted fairly well to the full back position, and wouldn't we all love a full back like that? Yeah. So he's my number 2.
And I suppose, Sir, just about your from, say, one of your players that we haven't mentioned so far that came in at number 6 for you, before I bring you on to Tommy Welch, Sir. Tony Kelly from Clare. I know Tony personally. He's a club mate of mine here. He plays hurling with Ballyea. He plays football with my club, Clondigad, as well. I suppose Tony burst onto the scene really in 2013. A prodigious minor, won everything in terms of minor, 2 minor All-Irelands with Clare, followed up on under 21 hurling All-Ireland with Clare, and there was also, can he transition to the senior game? And I suppose Tony transitioned to the senior game very, very quickly and very easily, sir.
Oh yeah, like Jim, an unbelievable hurler. I was involved with LIT first years, and I went Anthony Daly was manager, and we came across this fellow in first year called Tony Kelly, and he was just different. Now I knew him from the minor scene anyway, but he was a different talent even then. Like, and he went on, like he's kind of like on his toes. He's like, he reminds you of kind of a gazelle or a deer, just kind of floating along the whole time. And when he's in full flow, he's a joy to watch. And then he went on to the Clare team, and sure, like, Unsung, he's unbelievable. And sure, like the championship that Ballyea won that year, like the win from strength to strength. And again, he was the driving force. And like as a boys, the first there, every game he goes out in, lads are kind of say cutting down his space, man marking him, or even double man marking him. And it doesn't seem to matter. And like when he gets, like, he's good at both sides. Even taking frees and notice he's right side and left side. Now I much prefer him on the left side, but like he's able to take them both sides. He's a fantastic talent, and like he's not number 1 here in our list yet, but like he has the potential to go on and be a number 1. Like, and he's going to be again, like like Brian Lohan seems to be getting a lovely tune of him. He's out midfield at the moment, like, and you can see Clare reaping the benefits by this, like covering the ground. That's what he likes to do. Just let him flow and play his own game. He's a joy to watch. He's one of the present kind of guys like up there with TJ and these as a people go to matches to see.
And I suppose, sir, in terms of Brian Lohan coming in Clare, in terms of Tony progressing, Brian has gone back to what he knows best in what won All-Irelands for Clare back in 1995 and 97, off the cuff, route sort of hurling, and that's probably going to suit Tony's game, because it means he's going to be coming in off an awful lot of breaking ball from the half-hour line. If the ball is going direct and long, there's going to be second breaking ball, and for a guy like a strike runner, there's probably no better strike runner in the game than Tony Kelly.
Oh yeah, once he gets on the broken play, like, it's very hard to stop. As one of the boys said, once he's in stride, it's hard to block. But you see, like Jim, the game has changed the last few years. It's kind of you sharp puck outs, you get to a cornerback, you walk the ball through the lines. Now it's lovely in its possession hurling, but it does mean that when it breaks down, it's stopped, of course. But like, it causes a lot of rooks, and by the time it gets to the forwards, they're all getting low with possession. Whereas the old style was, a good cornerback might cook a corner forward, and one good clip is gone up the pitch, but you had to fight for your ball. Now definitely Brian Lohan and Sean Tracy's gone in there as well, and he'd be much the same as Lohan, to be kind of saying, hey, you're big enough or good enough to fight for your own ball. Now it means you have to fight for possession, and they are playing it more direct. But like, you can play both ways and a bit sharp at time. But the modern game is kind of working through the lines, and people say, like, the lads are very fit now and very, very skillful. But in actual fact, the game, instead of getting faster, is actually getting slower, because everyone is getting possession, take it up, look around, hand pass it, crisscross the pitch, walk it through the lines. Whereas before, you just got it and shifted it. It wasn't as controlled. But that kind of say direct game suits Tony Kelly, because he's able to get on broken play. He'll score as many points in play, Jim, on balls coming out from the attack as balls going in, because he'll be coming in on the breaking ball. And all the good hurlers, like, left, right, he's capable of doing that.
And sir, I'll bring you on now to your selection from 4 to 2. And the guy I want to mention there, Tommy Welsh, I suppose a legendary defender for Kilkenny, one of the all-time greats, revolutionised his role at wing back. And for a guy sort of small in stature, he was feisty, he was tenacious, and he was the guy, the ultimate Duracell bunny of a type sort of player was Tommy Welsh. He just sort of never ran out of energy.
Yeah, the Duracell is right, like full of energy, great player. First game I saw him playing for Kilkenny was against Galway in the league game. He was corner forward, and like he was being marked. He was small, like he's not extra big, but he got back. You could play him anywhere, but we got back at that time. He was facing the ball, saw only the ball, and like again, Jim, he was good enough to sweep across the half back line. Didn't actually, he marked a man, but he was more or less marking the ball. He preferred to go to the ball the whole time, and Adrian referred to it there. The Kilkenny boys, like, they played hard on the edge, but they go hard for the ball. It's all about getting the ball first with these guys. That's what Tommy played as well. Like, very flamboyant. Like, he's the same now the whole time. We play a charity match. TJ there played a few years ago for cancer, and like, Tommy plays like, he plays it as if this is an Ireland final. That's the way they play. They play that out. Like, and they know no different. And like, he's larger than life. He's a great ambassador for hurling. Like, and it was nice to see him this year win these club championship with 2 in a row. Like, it made probably much from his all Ireland he's won, which shows what the GA is all about.
And I suppose, TJ Ryan, if I could come to you, a guy that just missed out on your top 5, but came in at number 6. He, as you mentioned, he came runner-up so many times in the All-Ireland Hurler of the Year. He was bound to get one, and he got it when Tipperary won it only last year. And I suppose Shamie Candlin stood up to the role. Liam Sheedy came back in. Liam Sheedy made him the main guy, and he was the sort of focal point around the attack, which the guys of John Mcgrath sort of fed off of, in terms of, he got Noel Mcgrath sort of revolution. It all spearheaded around Shamie's, the catalyst inside there, sort of the driving leader, and he sort of got the best out of all the rest of the Tipperary forwards around him, TJ.
Yeah, he certainly has done that. He's done that for a number of years now, and again, talking about consistency. Like Shawnee spoke about the importance of scoring goals. Like, Shamie has that feat of scoring a goal in every game last year, which is difficult. To get a goal in any game is difficult, but to get a goal every single day, he's been kind of the leader and the pinpoint of that Tipperary attack for a good number of years now. And Shamie's around a long time. Like, he's playing 10, 11 years with this tip. He's been consistent, and he's been runner-up for Hurler of the Year in the years 14, 15 and 16, and eventually winning it the year just gone and captaining his team to win in All-Ireland, which is just phenomenal. An incredible player, just a big, I won't say an old-fashioned full forward, like great ball winner, very dangerous, and he has that goal sense. He's looking to put teams away. I've been at the wrong end of it on a number of occasions, but just a fantastic player. A very good Tipperary forward line now, let me add. They play a nice brand of hurling, they play good ball, but he is key and he's pivotal to that team. And I think he's deserving of just being mentioned with these really good players. He's scoring again, very good. And Sheedy definitely gets the best out of him, and Eamon O'Shea and those guys. He seems to really revel when those guys are around.
And I suppose, TJ,
I was going to say, yeah. Sorry, Jim, he was probably unlucky not to win Player of the Year before he actually won it in the years just gone. Like, he has been a phenomenal player for the last 4 or 5 years.
TJ, I just mentioned a guy you mentioned. You said you had the wonderful duty of marking him once or twice. The legendary DJ Kerry. I suppose no one thought in Kilkenny after DJ Kerry another legend would arrive so quick, but DJ was the man himself, and Charlie Carter, the sort of tandem, the duo of the 90s sort of hurling. It was the DJ and Charlie show most days out, and DJ was just the goal assassin, really. He just took the life out of teams in terms of those sucker punches goals that he got at so many critical stages throughout the match. Just really drained the life out of oppositions.
Yeah, I see Adrian kind of smiling there and probably thinking back over definitely a certain number of games that had happened. But look, like, I know we're talking about the last 20 years, and obviously DJ's the year 2000, but maybe through the 90s he was just phenomenal. Like, DJ definitely changed hurling. Like, he was obviously, do you know what I mean, a really popular player for Kilkenny. He was just extremely skillful. I think it was Searle that said in commentary there through the 90s that there'll only ever be one DJ Kerry, and he was, like, effectively just kind of an artist in the forward. Just could do anything with the ball, could make it talk, and he basically was, I suppose, one of the best players of all times. I did play against him. He had it all. He had speed, but he just had that craft to get scores, critical time. I know now that different people might talk about steps and different things, but the bottom line was, when needed most, DJ Kerry scored.
And DJ Kerry, a very sort of elusive sort of forward. Just when you thought there was no real danger, all of a sudden he comes to life. He's always the guy that seems to pop up at the right moment. He's sort of instincts, his intuition in terms of getting to the place at the right time. His reading of the game in terms of just finding himself in that poacher position. He was like the Alan Shearer of hurling in terms of...
Yeah, Shawnee spoke about strikers and £100 million players basically back in the day, and that these guys didn't grow on trees. There was only a certain number of them around, and DJ was certainly one of those. When Kilkenny were in trouble, he scored goals. He dug them out of hole time in, time out, and he was one of those. Yeah, as you said, Alan Shearer, you can compare him to some of those guys because he just was a leader of that team, and he just changed the face of hurling there, and like it's probably grown all the way from the 90s to the 90s to where it is now. And I know you spoke about fellas like Keane Lynch and Tony Kelly and Aston Gleason, and these guys probably have the ability to bring crowds to matches, to keep hurling where it is basically as one of the greatest sports of all time, and to make people go to games. And we're all probably longing for them now, but certainly going back in the 90s, DJ Kerry had that ability.
And I suppose, Shawnee, I'll speak about a guy that came in 7th for you before I bring you on to selection in your top 5. Hasn't mentioned so far Lark Corbett. And Lark Corbett, when you score a hat-trick in an All-Ireland, you're definitely going to deserve attention and credit. And Lark was probably the guy who was sort of behind Owen Kelly for a year or two and then sort of outpassed him in some regards.
Yeah, and I suppose everyone thinks of that period when he was getting all those goals, that sort of 9, 10, 11 period. But it was referenced earlier about Tommy Dunn. Lark Corbett was on the same team. Lark Corbett was a key corner forward in 2001 as a raw 19, 20-year-old. I saw him down the park against Limerick, TG, I'd say. Yeah, the most of the final in 2001 was against Limerick. And just, wasn't terribly effective, but was getting on the ball. He was only a young fella. The occasion didn't seem to faze him. That was what stood out to me for a raw young fella just making a kind of a debut season. We just seemed to handle it. He was playing kind of forward. Declan Ryan, one of the elder statesmen, was kind of keeping an eye out for him. But you could see the independence in Lars' play. Struggled a little bit, and maybe the hamstrings, stories from him later on in his book, and that the hamstrings gave him trouble. But certainly just took fire. Just got his groove. The type of game that Tipperary were playing really suited him. Fast-moving ball. He started to click brilliantly with Owen Kelly, and fellas outside him, like, fellas that weren't of as high caliber, or well, not high caliber, but as recognised. Maybe fellas like John Ryan in the half-forward line, second types of players that were winning ball in the air and throwing it around beautifully. They played to a certain pattern, which absolutely fit completely into Lars' game. And as you said, like the 3 goals, like would go down in history as, super goals, crucial goals that came at the right time before halftime. There was then to put the sucker punch into the Cats. And he was so mad that he even went. I don't think any player would go and do what he did against Tammy Welsh. Like, it was an insane thing to do, really. They were probably concocting it for a couple of weeks leading up to it. But he was so kind of mad. He said, "No, let's have a go off it." And obviously, it affected his own game, and it was controversial. And he probably, as a forward, should have played his own game. But he had that off the cuff. I'll do it for the team. He was a real team player. And I love watching him. But I just, going back, everyone seems to kind of remember the latter stages of his career, how good he was. But I always think of the early days. And I always remember that game. It was a good Limerick team that beat us in the first round in the park in 01, TJ. Like, they were a good side, very, very unlucky. I think he were beaten by Wexford later on in the year, TJ. He stepped up. I'm not sure it was McDonough or someone. Fine and able for a young fella. You could see that he had self-confidence, that he had a good, mature brain in him for a young fella. And I just love going to matches to see him again go again. He was just phenomenal. Kind of he kind of held the hurley long. He hardly ever shortened it. He had that ability to skill on off his left and right. Held the Kittoak style, with a smashing hurler, and could have been higher. From again, like we've all said it, all these fellas could be potentially number 1. I put him at 7, but 19 goals in 3 seasons, off the wall stuff.
And I'll give you the duty now of talking about, I couldn't let a Galway man talk about Joe Canning, so I said I'll give it the duty of a Cork man, the honour of talking about Joe, because Cyril might be talking about Joe till midnight. So, Shawnee, Joe Canning for you. Well, I suppose, look, one of the best free takers of all time, probably one of the best sideline ball takers of all time, and probably off the snap sort of shooters in terms of instinct, just getting the ball, turning on a swivel, and Joe 9 times out of 10 on the dime.
Yeah, and like we're on about hurlers of the year, but people forget that Joe was a young hurler of the year as well. He won Young Hurler of the Year in his debut year in 08. And that 08 season, I suppose, as a Cork man, I remember it because being in Thurles that night, Cork had a fantastic win. They came from the death, really. God, we were well up at half-time. I mean, the game is synonymous, I suppose, with Donal Oak sort of piggybacking Joe and pulling him down and getting sent off. And I think Joe getting the resulting penalty and slinging it again as a young fella. But But like, again, was an independent type of guy. I think he took a break from hurling for a while as well after his minor grade, between, you know, the minor and senior period. Obviously, he had a lot of hurling done by 18, 19 years of age. Took time out, which to me suggested a guy that was fine and independent, knew exactly what he wanted from life and from the game of hurling. But, you know, I referenced it earlier, 27 goals in 55 championship games today, young hurler of the year in 08 and 17. And again, when you're looking at a spread, like to win an All-Star in 08 and then 10 years later to win another one in 18, like that's kind of serious stuff. A lot of fellas that we've mentioned, you know, have won them within, you know, certain periods of 3 and 4 year windows. But to win an All-Star 10 years later, I mean, that is phenomenal. It goes to show just what a hurler he is. You reference it yourself, Jim. Free taking, 21s, penalties, line balls, and scores from play. The standout one, of course, 2 standouts are the catch and the swivel in the Leinster final in 15.
Yeah,
and that last minute point, which will be forevermore against Tipperary, they were 2 super scores.
And I suppose, Adrian, it brings you on. We've nearly everyone talked about, so you get the honour of talking about 2 guys in your top 4. We'll start off with your number 4 selection, Kilkenny man. And I'm sorry to say, Adrian, these are 2 Kilkenny men you have to talk about now. So we'll start with the first one, TJ Reid.
Yeah, I was just looking at the top 10 before we started, Jim. There was 6 Kilkenny lads in it, which maybe a little bit of bias towards Leinster here, yeah, even though we have no love for Kilkenny, as you know, Wexford. But yeah, TJ, I think I mentioned before, you know, in terms of TJ, just phenomenal. What I have to say about, you know, most of these hurlers of the year over the last 20, I know most of them are maybe some of the younger lads, but they're all so modest. There's no arrogance, there's no narcissism, they're just genuine, decent guys, you know, and I think that has to be said as well. You know, a lot of us here on the call know these guys, and they're just normal citizens, you know, so no airs or graces. They're not Premiership footballers walking around in a Ferrari, you know, they're just normal Joe Soaps and lovely guys. But yeah, TJ is phenomenal. Like, you know, we've spoken, there was DJ back in the early noughties finishing up his career, then Henry came along, King Henry, and you know, he was the you know, carrying the mantle up front, you know, and TJ really for the last 5, 6, 7, 8 years since Henry's kind of departed has been, you know, really leading at the front for Kilkenny, with probably Walter Welch, the other kind of, you know, twin tower up there, I'd call him. You know, if you can tame TJ and Walter in the game, you're going a long way to beating Kilkenny. I know that's up front, but yeah, just unerring accuracy from frees. But you know, like most of these guys we're talking about, it's the team play. You know, to take the right options, you know, to see what's on, and if there's a player in a better position to throw the ball out. So there's no greed or avarice here. Like, it's all for the team, you know, and that's why many of these players are hurlers of the year, because that's what they are. They're team players. But yeah, no, TJ for me, you know, somebody mentioned earlier on, it might have been Shawnee, that, you know, maybe in another 2, 3, 4 years, if TJ keeps performing at the level for the next couple of years, he could be up, you know, at the top of the league here, you know, because he is another 3 or 4 years. I'm not sure, Cyril, what age he is. I think he's 29, 30, I think.
Yeah, that's right.
So yeah, so he probably has another 3, 4 years, you know, playing centre forward. Probably will rotate into full forward eventually. You know, so I wouldn't like to be marking him in the full forward line. I tell you, in 2 or 3 years' time, he'd be fairly dangerous with a high ball coming in on the edge of the square. I wouldn't like being a full back, putting a hand up with him. But and then I think you asked about JJ as well, Jim. Yeah, like the only thing about JJ, he was kind of unfortunate on the club scene. You know, he played with Johnstown Fenians, who were thereabouts, you know, in the Kilkenny Championship, you know, never really making it far. Most of the other players we spoke about have played with club teams that have been, you know, in All-Ireland club finals, you know, quite a bit. The likes of Henry and Joe Canning with Portumna, TJ, you know, a lot of these players, you know, have really, you know, brought it on with the club. But, you know, JJ came from, you know, a club, an average club in Kilkenny, but he really set himself out as probably, as I said, one of the best defenders ever in the game. For me, the best defender ever in the game. But I think he would be well held up there to be one of the best ever amongst all. But he just had everything. Like, a little knack of, you know what, you know, playing on the edge I mentioned earlier on. But for me, it was a subtle foul. He used to just, you know, catch, he with the right hand at the back of the helmet and just, you know, knock your head off guard literally a second before the ball was coming down on you. And it was just enough to knock the half forward line off. And before you know it, JJ had the ball up on the other, you know, the other end of the field. He was, you know, just, they were so crafty, so cute. You know, you have to appreciate that. You know, it's like the hurler going up, flicking the hurl from the opposition's there and catching it. You know, most referees would blow that for a free now. I think that's a tremendous skill, you know, to be able to do that, going up in full flight and knocking opposition's hurl out of the way and catch it. But it's deemed a free. But a lot of those Kilkenny players were just gifted at that. I don't know if they trained for it or whether it came from a young age, you know, playing in the primary school yard. But, you know, it's just something that's so hard to get right, and they were gifted, and JJ was the master for me, yeah.
And I suppose that we now come to the elusive number one. And I say for three of you, I know who your number one is going to be. So we'll just we'll go in category order. So we'll go, Cyril, first of all, for you, your number one, please.
Yeah, Henry Schaeffler, like I christened him King Henry a long time ago. First time I saw him, Jim, was up close and was playing for Watford IT. And I asked the boy, I said, where's this fella from? And he said, Kilkenny. I said, oh, Jesus, another lad for Kilkenny. Like, you know, he was fairly good. But I watched him closely. And the first game he played for Kilkenny to me was intermediate. He didn't, you know, like he wasn't the star growing up. You know what I mean? Now, I thought he was good for Watford. He was beginning to mature as he got on. And then, of course, he blossomed. Listen, like to our, I'm talking about Galway now, say, so $1 he beat us on his own. Just, he had the ability to take the game by the scruff of the neck. Playing well or playing, but like really playing well and turned into a great leader. And as it went on, he became more of a leader of a leader of a leader. And again, like Adrian has referred to there, like could take all the punishment, played hard, but played very fair. Great sportsman, you know what I mean? And like what he has done is unreal. But it's hard to believe. Going back further, you had the likes of Eddie Kerr for Kilkenny. And then you had DJ Kerry for Kilkenny. And then you know what I mean? I'm talking about forwards now. Now you have Henry. And now you have TJ Reid. Like they keep producing, you know, these kind of flamboyant players. And okay, they mightn't have as good, some of them mightn't have as good a players around him. Now Henry had great players around him. Undoubtedly he came in a great time. But he was a great player. And there was one game against Galway. I think we're well up at half time. In the second half he came out and took over. And another Ireland against Tip, which now does. He wasn't going that well, and Tip got a 21 penalty, and he stood up and took the ball in the back of the net. Even not play or to that time, and when the big shot had to be taken, Henry was the man to do it, and he kept doing it. Of course, with the club, like he did the very same thing, like a fantastic club. And then of course now he's got into management and has done the same thing again. And I suppose further down the road, Kilkenny people will figure, well, he's going to be the senior manager, and of course that's when the real trouble starts, because then he has to do as good as Brian Cody, which is next to impossible to him. Maybe someone like Henry could, but to me, like he's a standout player and a standout sportsman, like through thick and thin and through the good times and the bad. No, he's mostly good times, but he's also been defeated. But he's took it at the chin and got on to the next level again. And even now in his management, you can see that coolness and that kind of able to think under pressure and kind of perform under pressure, which is a sign of a great player.
And I suppose TJ Ryan, I say this is fairly anonymous as well. We'll just get you to confirm your number one as well.
Yeah, there's no words of mine going to do justice. Like obviously, number one for me is Henry. I hurled in the same year as him. Just a phenomenal player. I can't do the man justice. Cyril has more or less said it all there, even throughout, and still he's hurting us because I was involved with the club team basically, and Henry killed us there too. Like, so he's kind of quenched me everywhere along the way. I'm not sure, like he himself and Brian Cody, like I suppose the era, the two of them will be linked, right? And like, was Henry lucky to have Brian Cody in this era to build a phenomenal team, or was Brian Cody as a manager lucky to have a key lieutenant in Henry? But two of them hand in hand. Obviously, their results speak for themselves, but the game I think Cyril spoke about there was against Galway, and it was 12, maybe the first day in the All-Ireland final. I was at the game myself. Just Henry, like God, Kilkenny were in trouble everywhere, and Henry seemed to spread the forwards out. He called for the puck outs. To me, the message looked very clear that he went back to his goalie and said, "Puck the ball down on top of me." He dragged Kilkenny single-handedly back into the game, and eventually winning them the All-Ireland. He got hurler of the year. Look, I could talk about Henry Schaeffler all night. Watched him all his career. Just a phenomenal player. Henry will be talked about in 50 and 100 years' time. And for me, definitely deserving to be king and to be number one.
And I suppose, Shawnee, you don't have Henry as number one, but I assume you have another Kilkenny man at number one, if another sort of Kilkenny forward. Am I correct?
I do. And look, Jim scratched it, changed the ways they got the tip backs out, had Henry 1, moved into 2, and blah, blah, but I suppose I've gone for, which is probably the wrong way to go about this, but I've gone for an idol as much as anything else. I mean, growing up, I suppose you get to play with your county and you feel when you get to the field you're as good as anything out there, or at least you think in your head you are anyway. But I don't know, like just, and maybe I'm kind of biased towards the 90s as much as the 90s. And I wasn't a goal scorer myself, but I was obsessed with goals. Like 33 goals for his county in 57 games. But for me, what's a phenomenal stat, and I didn't know that until I Googled, was he got 36 goals in 39 club games. A goal a game for his club, like. And yeah, you're right. You mentioned earlier his kind of the dynamo of himself and Charlie Carter, which is the same in the club scene. But one of the games that I think, I could be right, that Cyril was on about earlier when they just couldn't get the better from him, it might have been a game in Thurles, Cyril, in 97.
That's,
might have been
it was. Yeah, it was.
I remember an overhead pull that he did that day as well, maybe into the second half. The game was in the balance, and like his ability to just score the extraordinary goal, not just a goal, but the extraordinary goal. We played him in the league game in 2000. He didn't have a great final in 99, and we were kind of hoping that maybe he was on the wane after a long period of hurling in the 90s. But we played him in Nolan Park on a kind of a dreary enough February day, and he just, you could feel the ground shuddering with a couple of scores he got. He was an incredible hurler for both league and championship games, for both county and for club. And he also has won the award in the 90s. He was a hurler of the year in 93 as well. And the moments, I suppose, it's probably the 97 goal that Esther mentioned. His performance in 2000 against Offaly was a complete annihilation. And the score they got in 2002, which again is being used for any kind of Sunday game montage or hurling montage, and they show his, he balanced the hurling without catching it. He'd no catch left, and he balanced it and struck it off his right with a couple of clear players. Ollie Baker was one of them chasing after him. He was just an incredible player. Like, his consistency probably wasn't as good as Henry's, right? Like I mentioned Henry earlier, his consistency, I think Henry's was there and better, but just the explosiveness and the ability to get you up off your chair. Just I was always enthralled by the guy. Made him a few times play against him, played way back up against him, and even on the other end of the field, he was up the other end just looking at him with the jaw wide open. I think he was just an incredible talent, and I don't think we'll ever see his legs again. And
Adrian, if I can come on to you, I suppose, are you on the same line of thinking? I'm more or less with Cyril and TJ, and you have the king, as they call him, at number 1 as well.
Yeah, I do. Without a doubt, the best hurler I ever saw. And Cyril made a good point earlier. It didn't come natural, A lot of people forget that minor under 21, he wasn't a standout player, as a county or university and WIT. So Henry worked. Now, he was obviously very good, but he worked so hard. He trained so hard and disciplined himself so much to get to the level that he got to, So it's a template for all young hurlers with ability, that if you keep working, you can get to the top. But he's just skill over the years just got better and better. His leadership got better and better. What people don't comment is his physicality. Henry was 6'2", 6'3", about 16 stone, 15, 16 stone. He had like pair of ties like tree trunks. So, you weren't going to knock him too easy, and he had all that skill and panache as well to go with it. So, a lot of these great players we're talking about, the Joe Cannings, TJ Reids, Seamus Cannons, they're big men. Sorry, Shawnee, but they're big men. They're big men, yeah. So, but the game the game that stood out for me, and TJ mentioned it, I was at the game as well. I've been lucky to go to a good few All-Irelands over the last 20, 30 years. But 2012, Galway had that All-Ireland, and like going in a half-time, and everybody would have been delighted for Galway. But single-handedly, Henry took the game to Galway in the second half, and somehow got Kilkenny a draw. And that was all Henry's doing. Nobody else in that forward sextet done anything like the amount of work or the leadership he showed that day. So he got them to the replay, and they won the replay well. But, outside people think he scored 12 points, but it was more, the movement, the calling, just the hardship, the yards he was putting in that second half. Like, that was Galway's final. And I came out, without doubt, I said to myself, that is the best performance by anybody in an All-Ireland final in 35 minutes I've seen in the second half that Henry put in the 2012 drawn final second half, yeah.
And if I can just put it to you, lads, of all the 18 players that are on this list, 17 of them have been mentioned, but the one guy that hasn't been mentioned, I'll put it to Shawnee there as well. He's a Cork man as well. Just a few words on the 2004 winner, Sean O'Halpine, who didn't make the list for the 40.
And from the answer to God, this has been a very difficult task to pick to any community, anywhere from 11 to 20 community. He was super hurler, you know, came around, you know, and you know, had to pick up the game late. And look, I would have played a good bit with Sean O'Halpine. I mean, you're on about Henry. I mean, how hard that guy works at his game. Obviously, like, players come up through the ranks. He was a minor. He was a minor 95, and he was a Cork 21 then in 96, 97, 98. We won 3 Munster titles, and Cork won the All-Ireland 97, 98. Like, Ilse definitely got better and better. He was a good player. He missed the Limerick game and came back in 02. You could see him physically developing, and you could see his striking in particular, his striking under pressure, getting better and better. And he hit the pinnacle, kind of in that 03 to 06 period. He won county medals. He's 2 county medals with Pearshing as well, North Side rivals of my own, Glen Rovers. He was a brilliant club player too, Jim. Teague tough, and the lads have referenced, 6 foot high, Teague tough. You never got it easy off Sean O'Halpine, whether it was aside in training. He trained and played practice games as hard as championship games, a bit like Tammy Welsh. He was a super, super player, a great athlete, a great ambassador for hurling and a great ambassador for Cork. And look, very, very unlucky not to be in there, Jim. But just the list is so strong and the quality is so high.
And I suppose on that note, we have touched on all 18 names that have won Hurler of the Year from 2000 to 2019. So I'm just going to count back people's lists. So for Sir Farrell, at 10, he had Austin Gleason. At 9, he had Keane Lynch. At 8, Richie Hogan. At 7, Michael Finley. At 6, Tony Kelly. At 5, Lark Corbett. He had a tie at number 4 between Joe Canning and Tommy Walsh. At 3, he had TJ Kerry. At 2, he had TJ Reid. At 2, he had DJ Kerry. And 1, he had Henry Schaeffler. For TJ Ryan, at number 10, he had Jerry O'Connor for Cork. At number 9, he had Michael Finley from Kilkenny. At number 8, he had Keane Lynch. At number 7, he had JJ Delaney for Kilkenny. At number 6, Seamus Candlin for Tipperary. At number 5, Tommy Walsh, Kilkenny. At number 4, DJ Kerry from Kilkenny. At number 3, TJ Reid from Kilkenny. At 2, Joe Canning from Galway. And at number 1, Henry Schaeffler from Kilkenny. For Shawnee Mcgrath, at number 10, he had Dan Shanahan from Waterford. At number 9, he had Richie Hogan from Kilkenny. Number 8 was Jerry O'Connor from Cork. Number 7, Larry Corbett, Tipperary. Number 6, TJ Reid, Kilkenny. Number 5, JJ Delaney, Kilkenny. At number 4, Tommy Walsh, Kilkenny. At number 3, Joe Canning, Kilkenny. Number 2, Henry Schaeffler, Kilkenny. Number 1, DJ Kerry, Kilkenny. At number 10, Tommy Dunn, for Adrian Friendland. Now at number 10, he had Tommy Dunn from Tipperary. At number 9, he had Owen Larkin from Kilkenny. At number 8, he had DJ Kerry from Kilkenny. Number 7, Tony Kelly from Clare. Number 6, Tommy Walsh from Kilkenny. Number 5, Seamus Candlin for Tipperary. Number 4, TJ Reid from Kilkenny. Number 3, Joe Canning, Kilkenny. Number 2, JJ Delaney from Kilkenny. And 1, Henry Schaeffler for Kilkenny. I suppose I'll just go for closing remarks, and just maybe for 30 seconds, I'll just come to Sir first. Sir Farrell. Just a fantastic list, Sir, from 10 to 1. And if I just talk about a player that's probably who just for 30 seconds now that hasn't won Hurler of the Year in the last 10 years, but for me, it's an absolute shock he hasn't won it. And in 2013, if Cork won the All-Ireland, no doubt Patrick Harkin would be on that list as well.
Sure, he'd be on anyone's list. If you're talking about a forward, or as a boy saying, if you're buying a forward in the morning, he's a fantastic player, has all the skills, and has the ability to get great scores. Not a great free taker, but outside of that, a great goal scorer as well, and a kind of a great leader up front. Has been carrying a Cork team that's kind of threatened to do things and haven't fully done it. And he's been very unlucky in the sense that not to take an All-Ireland, but it's probably still there for him. He's coming to the end of his career more or less now, but he's a guy that minds it very well, probably ahead of himself in training always. He probably does. I'm told he has kind of a job, does a few hours a day, but kind of does 3 or 4 hours every day training, which shows you what it takes. And he'd be on anyone's team. Beautiful skill hurler, a great hurler for young fellas to watch as well, just to learn all the skills of the game. And you know, if he, no one would begrudge him in All Ireland if he could lead Cork to one, because like he deserves it.
And for you, TJ Ryan, an elusive sort of list, and one Limerick hurler on the list in Keane Lynch, and probably your captain was inspirational as well in 2018, Declan Hannon, and I'm sure if Keane hadn't won it, I suppose Declan would have been an honorary recipient of us as well.
Yeah, a key player in the team as well. Phenomenal stick man. Has been a very good hurler underage for his school, for his college, and he's won a lot. And leading Limerick, obviously, to the promised land was huge for him. Just a couple of small things, Jim, before I finish up, right? First of all, Cyril definitely cheated because he got 11 players in, right? So I think in return, in return for that, right? If any of your listeners have any issues, I think you should share Cyril's number, right?
Yeah.
He's the chairman of the committee here, so if anybody's any issues, they should take him up with him, right?
We'll teach you in St. Thomas's. It'll be all right.
The second thing is just to say thanks, Jim. This has been very enjoyable. Great talking hurling with the boys, and we could do maybe a pint in front of us now or something. We could chat away hurling for the night. And the last thing is, it's probably given us just a mad longing for a great game of hurling right now. We're talking about massive players. Like, the game of hurling is in a brilliant place. These guys have taken it, and like, they've been responsible, whether it's DJ Kerry or Henry or TJ Reid. They've raised the bar and consistently have done it through the years. Like, if you take Messi and Ronaldo, I think one of the reasons they keep kind of raising the bar is because the competition among themselves. And these guys, year on year on year, have pushed each other to the very, very limit to get the most out of themselves. And I suppose we, the punters, people going to matches, people who love hurling, are in a fortunate position that we can go Sunday in, Sunday out. And it's obviously taken this pandemic to probably bring it home to us how much we miss this game.
Yeah, and I suppose, Shawnee Mcgrath, closing remarks for you now for the last 30 seconds. And one player that's probably struck my list, I know I go back to 2013 in the All-Ireland final if Cork had won it, but undoubtedly probably one of the best goalkeepers in the game probably does come from Cork. So such a talismanic, probably one of the best shot stoppers, and I no doubt Cork will win the list if there was number one in terms of goalkeepers in the country at the moment.
Yeah, Anthony Nash is a super keeper. And again, kind of came in, I suppose, at a stage of his career where he wasn't a young lad. He was mid-20s. Maybe felt that Don Lowe had plenty to go in the tank. Don Lowe picked up the Achilles injury, and the rest is history as regards Anthony Nash, two-time All-Star in 12 and 13 or 13 and 14. But certainly, like, I was involved with Jimmy in that period from 12 to 15. I mean, his free-taking ability, anything from 30 yards out on his own side was over the bar. And look, I suppose from a health and safety point of view, they probably had to change the rule. But like, what he brought to the game, I came down the lift after that game actually in 13, the replay. And I only looked at it the other night. I looked at the first half. I nearly got the gawk looking at it, to be honest. Jeez, we look back in those games. But like, there was 13 players on the line. They nearly had everyone from the crowd on the line. Pat Cronin had got fouled. It was a 21-yard free, and he billowed the net. But another guy coming down was actually working for. He was an American guy that was doing an article for Tourism Ireland, trying to sell Ireland in the States and what it was and the heritage in the game. But he was just marvelling, and he never remembered in any sport, even in the States or anywhere, where the whole ground stopped, watched the player for the 30 seconds running up the field, had to put the ball down, had to bait nearly everyone from the opposition, and then leg it back to the other side of the field. And he was just enthralled by the guy. And look, I said, we've become part. We're used to it now. That's what he does day in, day out. We've seen doing it in training. Now, I know they probably had to change it, but it probably took a little bit, I think, from the game. But as a shot stopper, puck outs, distance, free taking, penalties, 21s, he was just phenomenal for us from that period.